Okay, so the next topic is then language acquisition and shame.
Okay. and shame of monolinguists.
Shame. Well, shame. Well, I feel personal shame because I've been in Japan I'm getting close to a decade now, and my Japanese is competent at a restaurant and kyakusho level, and that's about it. And you can make excuses for it. I worked for the two main companies I spent time working for were English language companies. The only people who spoke who I could speak Japanese to were pretty much the janitorial staff, who I did actually speak Japanese to. But it wasn't enough to immerse myself in the environment, and it's not. What the hell was I saying?
You were talking about having been here for nearly a decade, but
and there's I can make excuses all day long, and I can also say that most of the people I know who speak Japanese really well either were here on the JET program, and those guys I guess they just sat around learning Japanese all day when they weren't working, or they did some kind of massive intensive course. And there's exceptions to this rule, but a lot of the people I know who are fluent sort of came in that direction. Okay. And the few exceptions I know are like guys who speak like strange Yakuza dialects because they basically learned all their Japanese from hanging out in bars for the first couple of years they were here. Mm-hmm. But excuses aside, I find it's shameful that I don't speak very well the language of the country that I call home.
Yeah.
But at the same time, learning language is frustrating to me because I'm used to being a decent communicator in English. Mm-hmm. I do theater. Language is what I use to make, and so I get very frustrated when I can't instantly get my point across because I don't have the vocabulary.
Yeah, I understand.
Or I can't figure out the grammar.
That's a legitimate frustration.
The grammar to say it exactly the way with the exact nuance that I want.
Well, a lot of time, and this is actually something I struggled with in Japanese as well. And I actually am one of those. The outliers with regards to having attained a very high level of fluency in Japanese without having learned it formally. I can actually read and write the language as well fluently, and I think for me as well there have been stages in the progression of my language acquisition. That where I would try to express myself using sort of thought processes that have been that originated in English,
right?
But the problem is that it's completely different.
No, and that's the problem is that it's that stage before you can think in the new language.
Yeah,
that's where I am with Japanese because I'm not like with French. After a day,
it's so similar. I mean,
because I speak French as well, and I found I was in Paris a few years ago on a business trip, and the first 24 hours were awful because I couldn't remember how to say excuse me. I was saying sumimasen because my brain was going, it's your second language, use this one.
Yeah.
But after a day, I was fine. I was chatting with taxi drivers, no problem, and I won't say I was thinking in French. My main thought process were still in English, but I was formulating the sentences in French, not in English. There wasn't that intermediate step that I have with Japanese where I had to, there's a few things I can say automatically and it's sort of, that's the way you need to get with language, but I've only got 4 sentences.
Well, I find that I run into that problem more when I'm writing than I do when I'm speaking. I think in Japanese, so it's just natural. But when you're writing, and if you're trying to express complex concepts, then actually the unfortunate thing about Japanese as a language is that it's very, I would say compared to English, it's very terse, and it's very limited in its
very contextual.
It's contextual, but also there are just ways to say things, and there isn't a lot of flexibility to come away from those and not sound like a foreigner.
Right.
And in English, I mean, to some degree that's true, but there's just so much more flexibility in the language. You can wax poetic. There's a lot more vocabulary available to you.
You can use archaic phrasings.
I mean, we have a thesaurus that's larger than the dictionary in Japanese, and so that being said, I do come from English, and that's my native language, of course. And there are things that when I want to express, very complex or very sophisticated thought processes in Japanese, I'm limited to a certain phraseology that has been developed for expressing things in Japanese that don't necessarily allow for this sort of transition into the target language.
Right.
And but here's the deal. I mean, when I discuss these things with my friends, I have Japanese friends who are they went to Waseda or they're Todai, and they've mastered their own language, and I'll have them look at things that I've translated or that I've written myself, and they will say it's too complicated, and they just really simplify it. But I'm never satisfied with the simplifications that result, and I feel like they've dumbed down,
right,
what it was I was trying to express, or I guess it's like this. If you think about, for example, Apple marketing, okay, they use a lot of superlatives. They use a lot of action words,
right,
action verbs, to try to invoke feelings and associations with their products. They try to, they're instilling these things. It's like a meme. They're trying to place a thought or some kind of concept in your mind with regards to their products, and they do that through language, and they're masterminds at it. And actually, Steve Jobs mastered it early on. But if you try to translate Apple marketing material into Japanese, you sound like a complete moron.
How would you translate "think different"? How would you do that?
だから通常以外に考えましょうとか。だから本当におかしくなるよ。本当におかしくなる。はい。
It seems to it's not just that
意外な考え方しようとか、本当にそんなバカな役になっちゃうからダメだよ。
Oh man. So it was always, yeah. But anyway, so the question is, should someone who can't speak the language of the country they've lived in for a decade feel shame?
I think it depends on your goal, to be honest.
Well,
I mean, if your goal is to integrate and to be able to touch at the core of a culture and a people, then you need to speak their language fluently.
Absolutely.
But if you're here to enjoy the atmosphere, the benefits of society here, it's not necessary. I mean, there are a lot of people that do come here, and I came here and I learned the language just because I was fascinated with it, personally. And also I spoke Korean before learning Japanese, so it makes it that much easier. But I guess I have a natural inclination for linguistics.
How many languages do you speak?
4, but I know 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is impressive.
And it's just a hobby for me. So
I got to make that my hobby.
But I think language acquisition has never been a pursuit of mine until recently, when I went to Beijing, for the sole purpose of learning Mandarin. But before that, I had never learned anything in a formal setting. Actually, I studied Greek and Hebrew, just like Phil, in a formal setting. But that's not spoken language. That's not something you go out and you're going to be utilizing. These are ancient languages.
Unless you go to Israel or Greece.
Well, but we're still talking about ancient.
Oh,
Hebrew,
okay. Oh,
so
like
it's
biblical.
Yeah, biblical. Yeah.
So that
which
okay.
is quite different from modern Hebrew.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, and it's interesting too, because I did come from the whole total immersion and learning through context type of environment to going into a formal university setting and learning a language from that basis. And honestly, I think I learned more simply integrating than I did actually in the university setting.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about this because I've been trying to. I've got a nephew, and I'm trying to. My job is to teach him English, but what I'm trying to do is just expose him to the sound of it, and then just like a baby, he'll start. He actually does this naturally. He'll repeat what I say.
Yeah.
Even he'll get it totally wrong. He'll get the first syllable right, the last syllable right. Yeah. He'll just make it the pattern in the middle.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think that's really useful. I think
Yeah.
like he's still at the age where he can make the sounds and not be worried about whether it's katakana or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's helpful.
Well, there's actually a school of linguistics, but what it is, it's simply, a student doesn't even attempt to speak the language for the first, 2,000 hours of exposure, and they just listen and watch in context, and they're not even allowed to try to voice things. They're just there and listening and watching, because the idea here is that children, when they're learning languages, this is what they're doing. They're exposed to language in context, but they don't have the capability. They don't have they haven't developed the capability to vocalize things or to put things and to process them. But they understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because they were able to look at context and make conclusions. Oh, okay, this is what they mean. So this is what. When they do this, I need to do this, or when they say this, I need to do this. And it's like a dog, actually, if you think about it at that age, right?
It is. Well, they say dogs are the same level of intelligence as a 2-year-old. So
yeah,
that's around the time people are talking.
Yeah. So, but what they say is that even as adults are still capable of learning language as quickly as children. And they've actually proven it. Right.
Children, actually, I thought that was the thing, was that children don't learn language as quickly as we think they do.
Yeah.
Because, you think about it takes, I was in French immersion probably for 3 years before I spoke French.
Yeah.
So that's a long time.
Yeah.
And that's doing it every day for 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So anyway, I don't know if we've answered the question whether there's shame or not. I certainly feel ashamed.
And I say, hey, it depends on what your goal is.
Well, my goal is to spend most of my life here, so I think I just got a basic respect for the friggin' country I live in. I should probably.
So I guess what it is this: if you, what is shame in that sense, and why is it
maybe
important?
Embarrassment?
But why is it important to be embarrassed?
Oh, I don't know if it's
Well, why do we have this natural, or why do you feel embarrassed about it? What is it that makes you feel embarrassed? Does it feel because it feels like something one should do? Okay,
that's why, and I haven't done it as well as I think I should have done it at this point.
Okay,
I think that's why.
Okay.
Next topic.
Yeah. Well,
What is this, a family podcast?